Most likely we'll have some people that trickle in late, as these things always tend to do. Welcome to this session, New York State Geothermal Drilling Regulations, Perspectives on Changes. And as we all know, there's a lot going on as it relates to geothermal drilling. Some of you were at the site the other day, so you got to see some of the fun that goes into geothermal drilling and looping and grouting. It's an adventure. We have a lot of fun with what we do. And we're pretty fortunate today. We've got a full DEC panel plus Dave Rosick at the end. So we have Carrie Friello. She has been a great contact point for New York-GEO for the Division of Materials Management. So she's dealing primarily with the regulation changes for drilling deeper than 500 feet. As she will show you, it's not simply free-for-all. There's things that are coming. We have Beth Guidetti with the DEC Division of Water. So she's going to talk about several different pieces as it relates to things that are shallower than 500 feet, including some initiatives that the industry is talking about for getting some additional regulation and oversight for even those shallower boreholes. And then we have Kathy Prather. It's a tricky one. With Division of Materials Management. So that's what you do with the cuttings after you're done drilling the hole. That part did not change with the legislation, and it's a very important piece. And at the end, we have Dave Rosick, Rosick Well Drilling, past president of ESWADA, which is the Empire State Water Well Drillers Association, very closely tied with everything that we do with the geothermal industry. And we're going to go through about a couple 10, 12, 13-minute presentations from each of them. Dave's going to give us a 1 to 4 minute speech at the end. And then we're going to save some time for questions and answers, as I'm sure there will always be some. We're going to start right off with Carrie, and the stage is yours.
Okay, thank you.
I got it, A1.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carrie Friello. I am the Regulatory and Climate Coordinator with the Division of Mineral Resources at DEC. And I am happy to be here today to give you a little update and glimpse into our Article 23 rulemaking for closed-loop geothermal wells drilled deeper than 500 feet. As I think most of you know, this rulemaking is the result of legislation changes that occurred in late 2023 and early 2024, and the goals of those legislation changes have helped to frame DEC's goals for this rulemaking. And our goals for this rulemaking are pretty simple. To protect groundwater and surface water and natural resources, to protect public health and safety, to reduce administrative burdens from what they've been in the past under the Article 23 permitting program, to reduce costs where possible, to provide clear, consistent, and transparent requirements, and to promulgate the regulations as expeditiously as possible while ensuring an efficient permitting process as an end result of this regulatory process. The rulemaking will focus on the drilling and installation of deep, closed-loop geothermal boreholes and deep closed-loop stratigraphic test wells drilled deeper than 500 feet. The rulemaking will not address a whole host of other issues, including open-loop or standing column geothermal wells deeper than 500 feet, which are regulated under the existing Article 23 regulatory program. The rulemaking will not address any type of shallow geothermal well. The rulemaking, as Kevin said, will not address disposal of drilling fluids and waste generated during drilling and completion operations. These are addressed by existing regulations, which Beth and Kathy will speak to shortly. And the rulemaking will not make any changes to other DEC permits that may be required based on project locations, such as wetlands or stream crossing permits, for example. But ultimately, our permitting process that should result from this rulemaking will help to make sure the project proponents are aware when other DEC permits, other than the Article 23 permit, are required for their project. As currently envisioned, the rulemaking will be organized into 4 parts. Existing Part 550 of our regulations will be revised to include definitions related to geothermal boreholes and stratigraphic wells. A new Part 561 will be added, which will be specific to closed-loop geothermal boreholes. A new Part 563 will be added, specific to stratigraphic wells. At this time, it will be exclusively focused on closed-loop stratigraphic wells and may extend in a future rulemaking through a separate process to other stratigraphic well types. We will also be adding a new Part 569, which is incorporation by reference, and ultimately what that will do is incorporate certain industry standards into the regulation by reference. DEC is considering standards and references from CSA, IGBA, the National Groundwater Association, the American Petroleum Institute, and ASTM as we develop this rulemaking. Should these be incorporated by reference into the final rule, the industry would need to comply with them in the same manner that they will need to comply with other aspects that are explicit in the final regulations. DEC is envisioning several components to this rulemaking, but I want to emphasize that the ideas I'm sharing here today are just DEC's ideas at this time. We are very early in the rulemaking process. The requirements of the final regulations will be informed by stakeholders like yourselves and the public through the rulemaking process and are therefore subject to change from what we're going to discuss here today. So as currently envisioned, we are considering requiring a drilling permit for each closed-loop project, and therefore we're considering permit application requirements. We're also considering qualified contractor registration requirements to help ensure that permits are issued to knowledgeable entities and that a designated party is accountable to DEC for each project. The rulemaking is also envisioned to include appropriate borehole setbacks and surface restrictions from sensitive environmental receptors, utilities, property boundaries. We're considering borehole design, drilling, and installation requirements as key elements to the regulations, and we'll touch on this in more detail in a moment. In addition, we are requiring reporting requirements at the time of completion and decommissioning requirements to help ensure that boreholes are properly closed at the end of their useful life. Drilling, design, and construction requirements will be a key aspect to the regulations and must take into account New York State's diverse geology and its drilling history. In many areas of New York, especially in Western New York, Central New York, and the Southern Tier, there's an increased risk of encountering natural gas, oil, and brine in the subsurface, especially when drilling deeper than 500 feet. So this is the origin of the 500-foot rule in the Environmental Conservation Law, which was not intended to limit drilling deeper than 500 feet, but was intended to ensure that additional protections are in place when doing so. So New York has a pretty rich history of drilling. An estimated 75,000 oil, natural gas, and brine wells have been drilled in New York since the late 1800s. Of these, over 14,000 of those wells are still active and regulated by DEC today, as indicated on the map. Thousands of those wells, particularly in Western New York, target geologic formations less than 1,000 feet in depth, and therefore would be right in the depths that closed-loop geothermal wells are interested in going deeper to. So therefore, those borehole drilling and design construction standards for closed-loop boreholes and wells are critical to protect aquifers, the environment, and public safety in areas with increased risk of encountering these hazards in the subsurface. DEC is therefore considering requirements for the installation of permanent surface casing, which is seeded into competent bedrock and below deepest fresh water, and permanently cemented in place, and that conforms to American Petroleum Institute and ASTM standards in such locations where there is increased risk. Additionally, DEC is considering grouting requirements to help ensure subsurface fluids and gases cannot migrate to the surface through the wellbores. We are also considering requiring the use of blowout preventers or diverters during drilling in areas with increased geologic risk to ensure that pressurized gases and fluids can be contained or directed away from drilling rigs if they are encountered. DEC recognizes, however, that as serious as these risks are in certain locations, they do not apply statewide, and therefore we're considering how to account for these variations in our regulations so that areas without these risks are not subject to unnecessary requirements. Because as I said at the beginning of my presentation, our rulemaking is also aiming to ensure cost reduction and efficiency where possible. To that end, we are currently envisioning a regulatory program that does not include financial security requirements, nor does it include annual reporting to DEC. We're envisioning a permitting process that involves issuance of a single drilling permit per project, whether that project is a single borehole or multiple boreholes. We're envisioning a nominal project-based application fee with exemptions for federal, state, and local agencies. And concurrent with the rulemaking, we are working to create streamlined application forms, completion reports, and decommissioning reports that are specific to closed-loop wells. Finally, we're working to develop a generic environmental impact statement, or GEIS, specific to these closed-loop wells deeper than 500 feet. For those of you who are not familiar, a GEIS evaluates separate actions such as individual drilling permit issuance, that have common environmental impacts. The GEIS will satisfy state environmental quality review requirements for the rulemaking itself and for future permitting process associated with drilling permit issuance. So this GEIS is really key to efficient permitting once our rules and regulations are in place. The GEIS will evaluate potential environmental impacts from the drilling and installation of closed-loop wells and will make recommendations on ways to reduce or avoid adverse environmental impacts. The mitigation recommendations in the GEIS will be reflected in the corresponding regulations developed through the rulemaking process, and therefore this GEIS will be developed concurrent to the rulemaking. So as depicted in the image on the screen, the concurrent processes have several steps and multiple opportunities for stakeholder and public input. So the diagram reflects key milestones of the rulemaking process in light green towards the top, milestones of the GEIS process in dark green towards the bottom, and in yellow, it shows where the two processes combine for stakeholder input. So in the near future, we are at the red star just at the beginning. In the near future, DEC anticipates releasing some outreach information regarding the rule and a draft scope to the GEIS. That draft scope essentially outlines the topics that the GEIS will cover and outlines those topics which we consider to be out of scope as we do not anticipate any significant adverse environmental impacts. Those documents will be released for a 30-day public comment period during which written comments will be accepted by DEC, and we will hold stakeholder outreach meetings where verbal comments will be accepted as well. When those comment periods come to a close, DEC will evaluate the comments received, make any necessary changes to the scope, and we will issue the final scope to the GEIS. Also during this time, we will be reviewing our rulemaking package, the actual draft express terms, and working on the GEIS itself. We will then release the draft rule package or regulations and the draft GEIS for another public comment period. That public comment period will include public hearings where verbal comments will be accepted and will include an opportunity to submit written comments. Again, similar to the first comment period, after the comment period closes, we will review the comments received, make appropriate changes to the final rule and to the final GEIS. We will issue the final GEIS along with an assessment of public comment, and shortly thereafter, we will issue the GEIS finding statement and the final rule. The final rule will be effective upon issuance, following which we will move forward with implementation of the requirements. So during these public comment periods, we are looking for input. We are looking for your thoughts. We are looking for suggestions. We are looking for criticisms of the documents that we put out. And that probably leaves you wondering how you'll know when we do this. Well, any document that DEC issues related to this rulemaking will be noticed in DEC's Environmental Notice Bulletin, which is published every Wednesday on DEC's website. You can go to DEC's homepage and sign up to receive email notifications when the ENB is released. Alternatively, you can go to Division of Mineral Resources webpage for geothermal wells over 500 feet. You can click this yellow box that you see and sign up to receive updates directly from Mineral Resources regarding this rulemaking. And finally, we will be notifying both NY-GEO and ASWADA when we release these documents in hopes that they will notify their memberships to help make sure that you are aware of these opportunities for your input and that you participate in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. And we now have Kathy going to come up and talk about waste management.
There, thank you.
And I play musical chairs.
Thank you, Kevin. Good morning. Something said that there. Yes, I'm going to do a little segment here on waste management from geothermal installations. What solid waste regulations in New York State apply to geothermal installation waste? Well, you have to ask yourself, what is a solid waste? What is a waste? How can I handle waste on the installation site? What if I need to transport waste off-site? Where can I take the waste, who will accept my waste if I need to dispose of it. And finally, reusing or recycling waste, which my background, I should say, in materials management. I'm coordinator of the New York State Beneficial Use Program, and we do a lot of repurposing of industrial and commercial and construction byproducts, including drilling waste. So that's especially near and dear to me is the last bullet there. A big thing about solid waste under state rules, doesn't have to be solid. Most of the waste that you all will be encountering in your installation activities will be the cuttings, will be the drill cuttings. But obviously also many fluids are generated. If you need to containerize these for off-site transport and disposal, those are also under the purview of solid waste regulations, in particular transport, till they get to their place of treatment. In general, solid waste is anything that's spent worthless or in excess to the generator. That's a real basic definition. And if it's handled in ways that couldn't harm the environment, I'd just give a quick summary of what the regulation says there in the short or long term. So that's a pretty broad definition. But I will talk about the exemptions from that, the exceptions here. Two kinds of cuttings, solid waste. Carrie talked about above and below 500 feet. If your planned depth of your boring, your installation is going to be under 500 feet, we regard the cuttings as an excavated material, just as if you went in with a backhoe and dug out some soil or blasted some rock. It's part of, construction and demolition debris. I've given the regulatory references there. A lot fewer requirements for that as long as it's clean, not contaminated with petroleum or anything you might have encountered. Hopefully unlikely at that shallow depth. Greater than 500 feet below ground surface plan depth, it becomes drilling and production waste. And Carrie talked about changes to the regulations. Our solid waste regulations match what would be the old, or soon to be old regulations, more so than, going forward in the future, we may do when we do our next rulemaking for solid waste, we may try to align our requirements with mineral resources regulations more so. But for the present, if you're below 500 feet, it's drilling and production waste as defined in the regulation I cite there, and it's considered an industrial waste. If cuttings are in the excavated material category below 500 feet, all kinds of possibilities. If there's air or water as the drilling fluid, we have fill regulations. You can keep it on site. You can send it off site as clean fill. You could dispose it on site with owner approval. You could take it to a C&D debris landfill, which might be an easier, cheaper alternative than an municipal solid waste landfill or an industrial waste landfill. Might be a cheaper option for you. And if you're transporting it, if it's C&D debris under 10 cubic yards, which is the size of a small dump truck, no waste transporter permit or registration is required upstate. If you're in the New York City area, a different story. Rules are stricter there for transporting waste. But even if you're using other drilling fluids, if they're water-based, the second column here, you can, you want to dewater them on site if you can. That's always a good option. Take them, and you can still take them to a C&D debris or a municipal solid waste landfill. You can dispose of them on site again with owner approval. I had a water well put in recently, and my husband and I didn't mind the bentonite river flowing through our orchard. But, it depends. Maybe your property owner will want things cleaned up a little bit better. And again, the exemption for less than 10 cubic yards for transport. If they're drilling in production waste, things get a little more tricky. we've made a policy decision. I don't know if it's ever been put out in any kind of a public document, but during the discussion of handling, hydraulic fracking cuttings and so forth, we determined that if there was water-based drilling fluids or air or water, you could take those to a C&D debris landfill regardless of depth, even though they're drilling in production waste. So that's a help for folks doing geothermal. And there's a clear exemption in waste transporter requirements for cuttings that are just rock chips. And those, again, we have an exemption if it's just air and water and rock, to dispose of those on site with permission of the owner. Other drilling fluids, again, if they're water-based, you can go to the C&D debris landfill, even though it's not C&D debris, it's drilling in production waste. Otherwise, you need to take it to a municipal solid waste or industrial landfill that will take industrial waste, and you've got to fill out the appropriate paperwork. You guys are still under the Bevel exemption as far as I know, so that's, there's no hazardous waste testing involved. But you got to do all that other stuff. And waste transporter permits are required to transport that kind of waste, and that's anything over a ton. Now, I would imagine, if you hit something, if you hit oil, if you hit any kind of, drilling through a contaminated site, anything unexpected, if it gets contaminated, we got to treat it like an industrial waste. But hopefully not. And I mentioned about containerized liquids. Anything not meeting the paint filter test, which is a very common test used for waste going to a landfill. New York State landfills can't accept bulk liquids. They can't accept bulk liquids. So you want to make sure to dewater whatever you can on site as much as you can. These kind of things, if you got a frac tank there or some, if you're taking it off site there, you need that transporter permit. Reuse possibilities. I mentioned earlier, I'm part of the beneficial use program at DEC. If you're not fitting into any kind of an exemption or what we call a predetermined or a generic beneficial use determination, you can get a case-specific. You can petition to us for a case-specific use determination for your cuttings to allow off-site use. In general, won't be needed for on-site use, but fill or gravel substitute. I think many of these cuttings would make an excellent substitute for mined materials, obviously. If you've got clean cuttings below 500, or it's shallower than 500 feet, perhaps a group of you could band together, or if you're doing installations in different places, you could get a centralized location and get a registration as a C&D processor or C&D handling facility, and you could, bring your cuttings there, dewater them, test them, sell them. That's a possibility as well. And that's it on my slides there. I did bring today, I only have a few copies of this, but this is a little document that Carrie and group asked me to put together to summarize solid waste requirements. It's Managing Solid Waste, a guide for industry, and it includes a flow chart with regulatory references at the back. As I say, I bought a couple of paper copies today, and I would be glad if you contact me at the address below. This isn't on our website, but I can send you the PDF version if you would like. And hopefully you guys will get these in the proceedings, and you'd be able to use the links, or simple enough to find on our website. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Up next, we have Beth with Division of Water, and as it shows here, additional DEC permitting requirements. She's going to have a broad spectrum here. Enjoy. Thank you, Beth.
All right, so Kathy and Carrie already spoke about some of their requirements, so I will skip over their stuff. DEC has a lot of additional permitting requirements that may apply on a site-by-site basis. So, of course, Carrie spoke about closed loop that are greater than 500 feet in depth. She also has open loop greater than 500 feet in depth, which was not spoken about today, but I just want to mention that in case any of you have thoughts of going in that direction. And then Kathy discussed solid waste from planned depths of greater than 500 feet. Natural resource permits include tidal wetlands permits, protection of water permits, and regarding endangered and threatened species, you want to avoid impacting them or else you will need to get a permit. And I included the references to the law and regs for each of those. The fourth one listed there is freshwater wetlands permits. They did ask me to kind of expand on that. Actually, the well drillers asked me to expand on that. So I did get some information, and I'm happy to share that with you all today. So the Freshwater Wetlands Act was passed in 1975 and amended in 2022. Their new regs went into effect on January 1st of this year, hence the questions from the well drillers. The changes are that the jurisdiction is no longer tied to maps. They regulate wetlands and adjacent areas. They regulate larger wetlands, which are greater than 12.4 acres in size. But in 2028, that size will decrease to wetlands that are greater than 7.4 acres in size. They also regulate smaller wetlands of unusual importance. That unusual importance is defined on their website. There are 11 different items that are listed, and that's all I know about. Okay, so the determination process. You apply, and then DEC will go through these 3 steps. First, they will determine if there are state jurisdictional wetlands or adjacent areas within the parcel or property boundaries. Step 2 is their wetland delineation, where they will determine the extent of wetlands and adjacent areas on the parcel or property. And step 3 is to determine if a project will require an Article 24 permit. So you can go to DEC's website to fill out the online jurisdictional determination request form. It's a really simple form. I didn't fill it out, but it really had hardly anything on it. You do have to allow pop-ups. If this is for a landowner, all you need is the parcel ID, which needs to be in the correct format that you can obtain online from your local real property services. You need your physical address and then just your contact info. If it's for a private company or an NGO, you're going to need that same information and also the company name. And we always at DEC appreciate shape files. It's not required, but very helpful if you're able to provide that for those larger sites. So they've drafted a general permit for typical projects that's currently drafted, and they're evaluating their comments and plan to finalize it in the coming weeks. So that general permit would have a 5-year term. And important for geothermal is that it includes construction or modification of geothermal systems for single-family dwellings. And for the well drillers in the room, it also includes water wells. So you should be set for 5 years. After that, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Okay, so back to permit requirements for U-10s. Division of Water has a few different programs that we're going to have to look at. That's under Article 15 of the ECL. First thing is the Water Well Contractor Program. For open loop systems, we require company registration, certification for the individual on site for all well depths, and reporting for those that are less than 500 feet deep. If it's open loop greater than 500 feet, you're reporting to mineral resources. For closed loop, we currently have no requirements. Water withdrawal permits are going to be issued to facilities, not the installer. For open loop capacity greater than 100,000 gallons per day, which is just under 70 gallons per minute, Unless you're on Long Island, which is Nassau, Suffolk, Kings, and Queens counties, you're going to need a Part 602 permit, which is a Long Island well permit. That's for open loop wells up to 500 feet that are capable of producing greater than 45 gallons per minute. Those numbers in both cases are per facility. It doesn't matter if you're using that water for the open loop system or if it's for industrial use or whatever. Per facility, if you exceed those numbers, you're going to need a water withdrawal permit. Construction stormwater permits are required if you have a disturbance of 1 acre or more. Unless you're in the New York City watershed east of Hudson, the number is less than 1 acre. All right, SPEEDs, the State Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. They regulate point sources of pollutants to groundwater or surface water. Heat is considered a pollutant under Part 703, 704 regulations. We've had a lot of internal discussions and still are clarifying some of the details regarding SPEEDs permitting. I did have a request that we kind of expand on SPEEDs permitting, so I'm going to emphasize that I am not a SPEEDs permitter, but this is the information that they asked me to share with you. So here is a flow chart that kind of gives you the basics, and if you run into any issues while you're drilling, you're going to want to call SPEEDs, talk to the regional permit administrator, and they can help you through the process. So first of all, this is for installations of wells and borings that are less than or equal to 500 feet. The rest are going to be handled by Division of Materials Management and Minerals. So if you have a discharge to surface water body or potential for overland flow, you are going to definitely need a SPEEDs permit. If you are discharging to groundwater or there is potential to infiltrate, if you are not adding chemicals during the drilling process, you probably don't need a SPEEDs permit. If you are adding chemicals, which can include but are not limited to water treatment chemicals or lubricants, then you will need a SPEEDs permit. However, if you encounter a pollutant during drilling, your first option is always to hold and haul, which I know everybody gets super excited about, right? So your second option is going to be to consult with DEC. And we can discuss your different options. Just come to us with your plan, possibly discharge back to the same hydrologic strata that you got the water from, or maybe get a SPEEDs permit. So we can discuss that with you. These pollutants that you might encounter would include brine or oil and gas that you encounter during drilling, whether it's planned or unplanned, and any other parameter, any other contaminant that might cause an exceedance of ambient groundwater quality standards. And what would a SPEEDs permit look like? For construction and operation, they require flow monitoring, water treatment chemical reporting requirements, permit limits for water treatment chemical parameters, and at least annual reporting requirements. For operation only, and this would be for open loop systems, you're going to have temperature monitoring or limits, 90 degrees for non-trout waters, 70 degrees for trout waters, and delta T limits in coastal waters. And very large discharges may require a thermal study in the SPEEDs permit to determine if there are thermal impacts. All right, moving on to legislation. So this has been a hot topic for quite some time in the water well drilling community. DEC has been engaged with the Empire State Water Well Drillers Association since 2019 regarding geothermal drilling. We have drafted legislation. It did make it up the hill, was seen by the Senate, and then did not get beyond that. So that was in 2019. So we continue to have discussions with the water well drilling industry and more recently with the geothermal industry. So it could be difficult for DEC to pass a new law, and we're aware the industries might initiate some legislation themselves to protect the environment to an acceptable degree, and at the same time be a benefit to the industry by having DEC maintain a database of geothermal wells or boring records. So a little disclaimer, other laws and regulations may apply on a site-specific basis as determined by DEC's Division of Environmental Permits and individual DEC programs. So refer to DEC's website for program details and contact information. For general permitting questions, you usually would want to go to the regional permit administrator, but in central office, we have the Bureau of Energy Project Management and the Division of Environmental Permits, and there is their email address. For Speedy's permitting questions, please contact Peter Meyer. And for everything else, feel free to contact me. If it's not something I can help you with, I'll try to get you pointed in the right direction. That's it.
Vacate.
All right.
I'll grab your sign. And now we have Dave Rosick with the Empire State Waterwell Drillers Association, past president. We just lost him this year. Stepped down. Well, we never go away.
Yeah, we never go. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Rosick. I own Rosick Drilling. I've been on this panel last year, so I don't have to tell you the same thing as I did last year, but I've been a driller for over 50 years and still have all my fingers. That's pretty good. I'm here representing Empire State Waterwell. A few of the issues that I had in mind were pretty much covered by, so I went from 5-minute speak to maybe a 10-second because everything is pretty much done. Licensing was the main thing that we want to bring up as Empire State. And I believe it's important that drillers on residential are licensed drillers. I mean, on big projects where there's many, many bores, we feel there should be at least one qualified individual. And that mainly is because on residential, many residentials have a water well there along with it, and you might be 20 feet from it. So it's important to be registered driller and have experience, not just a paper that you can take a test and pass that you've never been on a drill rig. So we'll see how that goes. Like I said, a lot of the other things Carrie, Beth, and Kathy answered already. The other thing I wanted to commend the DEC was on their mapping. The new mapping they have for water wells is so useful. We bring it up all the time. Well, this guy did this, and this water table's here. And it would be so nice to have geothermal bores in that too. And I don't mean every one for 100 borehole project, but maybe a generalization of a large field, what you encountered from one end of it to the other, and the residential more than is important for more than anything. You go give a price on something. It's really nice to know, am I bidding a job 20 feet to bedrock or 200 feet to bedrock? Big difference in the cost of a water well, and especially a geothermal system where there's many boreholes. So other than that, like I said, you guys pretty much did everything for me. So I guess I'm allowed, plenty of time to drink your coffee or whatever. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Dave. So now we do have some time for some questions and answers. It looks like we've got roughly 19 minutes. Just a couple little comments there. As Dave said, he is fortunate he has all his fingers. Drilling is a dangerous activity. It's the most important part of what this entire industry is. Without the boreholes, we don't have geothermal. Without the drillers doing it, whether it's somebody that's generational, multi-generational, just getting into it, really wants to be a part of it, loves what the technology is, it is a dangerous, highly qualified position in the field. These are the experts. The more conversation you can have amongst drillers and with the partnership with the DEC, if you don't know, ask the questions. Don't trust a spec book. We've all seen stuff that comes in from engineers and architects, ask questions. Ask the questions. I didn't know is never an excuse. And you're just going to get in trouble, and usually it's the drilling contractor that's going to have that finger pointed at them. So ask questions. Lean on the Department of Environmental Conservation. They're very open, they're very friendly, they're very helpful, and they will guide you in the right direction. So let's open it up to questions. Make sure that when you ask a question, stand up, state your name, who you're with, and speak into the microphone. Don't just shout them out. And we have Aowen wandering around, taking microphones. Fire. Next slide. Okay. Boom.
Good morning. I'm Elizabeth McCorvey with the Family Resource Center of Peekskill. I have a couple questions. The first one is, what permits are necessary? I mean, how far deep is it that you go below? If you go below 500 feet, that you need the permit? Because I see the drill rig in the box, the little for installers like myself that have never done any insulation, that does more of the not-for-profit side. And then two, the driller test with the National Groundwater Association is so hard. What can be done in New York State to help people? It just seems like they have a monopoly. I mean, I love groundwater. I love, but I just don't think it's fair. I heard another driller from South Carolina complain that he couldn't get any of his guys to pass the exam, and I've had the same problem. I've taken it several times. I got a 66 was my highest score. Okay, and so that's what I wanna know, and what have you, so that we can have a fair playing field for the exams and to encourage us to get in the industry more. Thank you.
All right, it's good to see you again. First question was the 500-foot rule. If you're going deeper than 500 feet, you're going to talk to the Division of Mineral Resources, which Carrie presented on, and the Division of Materials Management, which was Kathy's presentation. If you're less than 500 feet, you can call me. I handle the water well contractor program for the Division of Water. You could also contact your regional permit administrator, so they would help you figure out what permits you might need. Either way, depending on the size of your project, the location, there's a lot of site-specific details, so it's always good to contact DEC and figure out what you need on a site-by-site basis. As far as that exam goes, I know the drillers are chuckling up here because we've heard that complaint from the beginning. Those exams are super hard to pass, and everyone seems to get a 66 or a 68. So you're in good company. We're discussing with the Empire State Water Well drillers what we should do with that. There is a thought that maybe we could require a certain amount of experience instead of having those exams. We could have a different set of exams altogether. We're open to suggestions on that, and I would encourage you to talk to who?
Chris Root is the new president.
Okay, talk to Chris Root. He's with Empire State Water Well and Root Water Well Drilling. I can't remember the name of his company, but he's the current president. So you could comment and let him know your thoughts on what kind of legislation could be passed in that respect.
Hi.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things I was supposed to bring up, but I didn't, thought they had it. But anyway, was the testing. What the testing's a pain in the neck. Our guys only have to go to Albany, which isn't terrible. But Chris Root called me. I talked to him about some of this, and he's like, 3.5-hour drive for them. So we need to do something different. We'd like to get it maybe back to the state somewhat. We are working with DEC on trying to make that better. The other issue, like I sent 2 of my guys a couple of months ago, they get down there, and it's only an hour drive for us. Well, the computers went down. They're like, well, so what do we do? They go, well, you go home. Well, we took the time off to come here. No answer. And then to reschedule it, it was it's tough. You guys, a lot of the drillers here. So we do need to fix that somehow.
Experience is the best teacher. I mean, fair is a weird way to put it. The reason why a lot of the rules and regs and what they are is to protect groundwater. It is our most valuable resource. And it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen, when you cross-contaminate, you drain an upper aquifer into something lower because you're not really sure what you're doing, and it's different in parts of the state. What you see in the North Country is different than what you see in New York City, is different than what you see in the Finger Lakes, different than Buffalo. Every place has its own little tweak and adjustment and learning curve. So lean on the partnerships that you can develop. Call drillers, call geodrillers, call everybody, and share information. It's the most important thing we can do. Next question. Brock.
Hi, Brock Yorty, Geothermal Drillers Association. First thing I want to say is it's fantastic anytime I can see two drillers on the end with regulators and we're all smiling and having fun. So thank you for sharing what you shared. Getting into the groundwater side, as we have this debate across the country on a geothermal borehole versus a well, and we have discharge permits and we're talking about producing water and going deeper, but Reed Maxwell with Princeton and Arizona State came out with that discussion about interconnection between surface water and groundwater, and this water being fossilized, possibly 10,000 years old. And as we go into these deeper aquifers and we're doing discharge permits and we're pulling this stuff out and running it into another watershed, are we having any consideration on what we're doing to what our future groundwater could be as we're producing it? Is there any discussions happening like that? And I know this is a damn hard question. You can say, yeah, we're talking about it. But I think fossilized groundwater is something we have to address in this industry. We can be sustainable with, getting our greenhouse gases down. But if we exploit our reserves, we're going to be in a tough spot. Thank you.
Who wants that one?
Carrie and I are just going to look at each other until someone decides that they have to pick up the mic.
You go.
Yeah, division of water. I mean, obviously, that's our goal, to protect groundwater. I don't see us crossing basin boundaries so much. I mean, for the most part, we're going to be either discharging at the surface if it's clean, or if you're discharging back to a formation, that should be okay in my mind. We're going to have to see where things go. Personally, I think that current law and regs don't really cover geothermal all that well, so we're having to interpret things. It's a little sketchy. So we're dealing with it. That's the best thing I can say today, is we're trying to work through it and figure out all the issues and come to some conclusions of what needs to happen. Do you want to add to that?
I think you did a great job answering that one. I think you did good. The only thing I would add is, from the Article 23 regulatory perspective, for other well types that we regulate, where we're talking about oil wells and gas wells that drill a lot deeper than the closed loop industry is looking to go right now, the fluids that are returned are required to be contained and required to be hauled by a Part 364 hauler that Kathy spoke to. Most of those fluids coming from those well types are hauled out of state for disposal in disposal wells in Ohio, or to industrial wastewater facility treatment plants in Pennsylvania, and it's expensive. We're aware of that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of drilling and production waste, so waste generated from over 500 feet, not disposed of in New York at wastewater treatment plants because it's been lumped in with oil and gas. It's been lumped in with high-volume hydraulic fracturing from DEC's review years ago. And this is the part where Beth was saying we're trying to sort this out and really figure out what should be done, what's overkill. And I think we're just going to have to work through our process, as she suggested.
My name is Michael Lodenk. We work for the New York Power Authority. Question is that we do a lot of work in New York City, and we have to get permit for from the various departments. Now, the question is, if we're doing work in New York City, who do we reach out to if we're doing work on a school project or any private property or any government entity project property, do we reach out to New York to DEC or DEP? Because we're trying to figure out which boundaries do we cross.
So you will end up reaching out to both New York State DEC once our regulations are promulgated, and you will continue to need to reach out to New York City DEP. They will have their own permitting process involved because they have no drill zones around their water tunnel infrastructure that you will need to pay attention to. And DEC, in the Division of Mineral Resources, will coordinate with DEP moving forward to make sure that we're not issuing permits in areas where there's water tunnel infrastructure, but you will still need to coordinate yourself with DEP. That'll be an ongoing need for any New York City projects.
So we also do projects on we have the project that we do on DEP property. So if we, and some of the work that we're doing, it's in a watershed area. So do we still have to reach out to DEC?
Yes, you will. Once the regulations for over 500 feet are promulgated, you will still need to reach out to DEC for a permit. I hope I'm good.
Following up on Mike's loading query, I'm Paul Chipoco, New York Power Authority as well. I think the question I have is the timeline, what the timeline is on the new regulations everybody was mentioning here, because I know, drilling permits are not required for boreholes or test wells. From our understanding of our communication with DEC, so there's definitely a learning curve here. Obviously, we want to do more of these in our projects, and we want to get a clear understanding of what to follow now and what to and we're going to sign up for the bulletin. And so there's a lot of things that we got to think about here, just to make sure we're not interfering with watershed and all these other requirements.
So
I'll go real quick on this. I think that's one of the most stressful pieces of this legislation change is that it created some confusion because it changed a piece, not all of it. And so we're working through this new permitting process for stuff deeper than 500 feet. And she can talk more about the timeline. I ask Carrie regularly, how are we doing? And they'll let us know when they're ready to let us know. Go ahead.
So if Kevin, you want to pull up my slide with the process on it. This, the process slide that I presented earlier that outlines the rulemaking process. There you go. Thank you. And the GEIS process. It is estimated, and please don't hold me to this. It is only an estimate, and a lot of it is outside of my control. It is estimated that from the time we release the very first document until the time we can implement regulations, it will be about a year. We are hoping to release the first round of documents in the very near future, and I wish I could be more specific than that, but I can't. So it is, I definitely recommend that you come to DEC's website, you sign up for updates, you let us know that you want to be kept in the loop, and we will do that, and we will be in touch with NY-GEO and ASWATA as soon as we release those documents so that they can notify you to be on the lookout. That first comment period is limited to 30 days. Keep in mind that first comment period is just the beginning. It is just one of several to come, but we definitely want to make sure that people are aware as soon as we release the documents, even though we can't be more specific about a schedule at this point in time.
We will blast it out many, many times. We will try to coordinate with the DEC to, be part of that stakeholder outreach side of things. We'll be around to answer as many questions as we are capable of answering. But we want it to be as collaborative of a process, as seamless as possible. And once we get to that start point, then the ball gets rolling and we'll have some fun.
And to Kevin's point, DEC wants the same. We want this to be a collaborative process. We are encouraging your feedback, your information, your criticism. We're open to it all. So what we are putting out in this first round really is just our ideas, and will be informed through this stakeholder process.
And we're pretty fortunate, right? We have international experience centering in New York State now. So there's a lot of ability. There's a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of good. But just because you can do it a certain way someplace doesn't mean you can do it that way in New York State. New York State's going to have their own laws, which is ideal.
Rami Gerges from ME Engineering here. Regarding engineering document, when we issue a specification for drilling or anything, this is mainly for the drillers. We don't list all the type of permits based on the depths. Is it required, or we just say driller has to obtain the necessary permit based on the depths of the well? What is the appropriate way to address that?
So I will throw this in there. You should know. You write a spec on everything. It should be on you so that when the bids come to you, they are all the same. Every driller is going to play by the same rule. Because from our perspective as drillers, if I know the rules and I call the DEC and I build that into my quote, it doesn't go necessarily back to the engineering company. It might go to the construction. It might go to the MEP contractor. It might go to the prime sometimes. And we'll ask those questions. All these different things add money to a project. Getting the owner of a project to agree to holding cuttings on site as opposed to being removed. And that is the spec that a lot of engineers write in there, is that the cuttings must be removed from site. And that matters significantly whether you're talking 500 feet or 510 feet. And the cost implications of that are massive. So I could bid you correctly, legally, and right, and I'm $500,000 more than the next guy. You go with the low bid, and now who's got the responsibility?
So the change order.
Change orders come, or they just do it illegally. And that's why I said before, not knowing, I didn't know, is not an excuse. And if somebody messes up an aquifer, whoo boy, you don't want that.
Yes. So, sorry, just to understand, should we list the type of permits in our specification, or just for the knowledge for us? Like, for what? That's why I'm attending here, to get the knowledge.
I would reach out to the DEC when you go to design a project and ask them specific to your site, because they've all said every site's a little bit different.
Okay.
We're out of time, but
As always,
the panel's here if you want to speak with them more.
we're done. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our panel.
Yes. What's that lady?